The story begins with a streamer finally achieving the status of king and ascending to the throne of souls, with the system congratulating him for being the first king to sit on the throne of souls and informing him that the reward will be given once he meets the specific conditions. The protagonist was genuinely happy, celebrating with his friends and live stream followers for finally reaching that level, until suddenly a being appears and stabs him, saying that he is a mere insect and that his heresy will not go unpunished. Shortly after, the Prota hears some people saying that there's an injured man there in his 20s and that he's bleeding a lot. He also hears that this person's heartbeat is weak and that he'll need a defibrillator. The Prota hears the countdowns and feels the shock, but he can't wake up. The doctors try again, but nothing happens. Then, on the third attempt, he wakes up, startled, wondering what had happened, as he was in a strange place full of corpses. He tries to remember more, but the only thing that comes to mind is that he was stabbed by a mysterious person. He then wonders where he is, even considering that he might be in hell due to the piles of corpses, but quickly becomes upset, thinking he never blasphemed against God in his life, so he shouldn't be in hell. Soon, he feels a sharp headache, as if his head were going to explode, becoming even more puzzled by his inability to remember anything. Suddenly, something comes to his mind, and he's shocked to remember that his name was Bai Chi. He was 20 years old, and he used to be a game streamer before he died. He was never famous, but due to one of the last streams he had done, his follower count had increased. All this happened while he was playing an open-world RPG called Throne of Souls. The game was set in a medieval fantasy environment that was suddenly struck by the crash of an alien spaceship, blending classic fantasy elements with futuristic sci-fi works. Since the game's release, all players praised it for its extremely high-quality graphics and immersive storyline. However, after reaching a very advanced level in the game, many players started streaming their struggles in the more difficult stages. But that wasn't a problem for the Prota, as being one of the best in the entire community, he began receiving more attention for his gameplay. However, the extreme difficulty made many people give up on the game and stop following the content. Suddenly, a system voice appears, telling the Prote that even though he had died, he would still remain alive. More specifically, the system explains that he had reborn, then asks if the side effects of rebirth were starting to fade. The Prota, startled, turns around and asks who said that, as the voice was very familiar. The system informs him that he was being analyzed from a higher perspective, and that each game created generates its own world. The Prota, intrigued, wonders if the voice he's hearing is from the Game World platform assistant, only to hear the system again explaining that his death was the special condition needed to activate the reward key of rebirth, and that, therefore, he has now been reborn in the world of Throne of Souls. He's confused by the idea of being reborn in the world of Throne of Souls, but then remembers the special reward he had received when he finally achieved the status of king and ascended to the Throne of Souls, wondering if the reward was this chance to be reborn, since he didn't even know exactly how he had died. However, he's pleased because this is a chance to return to life, but he quickly becomes frustrated, asking the system why it didn't place him in the world of bikini beauties from the game Memories of a Summer, and why he has to be reborn in that hell that is the world of Throne of Souls, saying it would have been better to have died for good, as that way he wouldn't suffer as much. The system explains to the Prota that the key of rebirth is an exclusive reward for the world of Throne of Souls, as the other games, unfortunately, don't have a similar feature. Intrigued, Bai Chi asks what unfortunately means, as it seems that his system wasn't too happy about it. He believes that a game like Throne of Souls would never give such a valuable reward like a free rebirth to anyone, and wonders why they want something from him. The system responds that it's quite simple. They just need him to do what he does best, sit on the Throne of Souls again. And if he manages to repeat that feat, he will receive an even better reward, called the Key of Time Travel, which will allow him to travel to other worlds in Game World or even return to his original world. The Prota is surprised by this reward, asking why they didn't give it to him before. Bai Qi, intrigued, tells the system that although the reward is interesting, what his system is asking for is impossible, since the game doesn't even have an infinite rebirth mechanic. After all, in a world as complicated as Throne of Souls, even a dog on the road could end his life. The system responds that although there is indeed no infinite rebirth mechanic, he won't be defenseless. His account on the Game World platform has 100 platinum games from various genres, and he will be able to complete special missions and tasks to acquire the skills and items of the protagonists from those 100 games and use them in Throne of Souls. At that moment, Bai Qi is impressed, realizing he could accumulate various skills from the games he had platinumed, and he imagines that things are starting to get interesting. Looking at his Game World collection, he recalls that he has always been a fan of all kinds of games and never limited himself to streaming just the most popular ones at the time. That's why these games are from all sorts of genres imaginable, from bestsellers to indie productions, and even visual novels. He becomes excited, imagining that using the skills and items from these games in the world of Throne of Souls would be quite intriguing. The system explains that the Prote could also choose to live as a common human without any abilities, as the choice was entirely his, with no objections. After hearing this, he ponders, thinking that if he lived as a common human, he would avoid the dangers of fighting bosses. But on the other hand, he would be subject to other mortal risks, like hunger. He quickly discards that option, as it made no sense. He then considers that maybe the system is planning something, since they presented this option only to make him even more determined to follow the path of the king. Bai Qi smiles and tells his system to stop joking around, saying he had already spent 20 years of his past life living as a common human. So, it seems like a joke that he would pass up this opportunity to be reborn and choose to live the same way again. He asks the system if there's any time limit to complete the main story and become king. Quickly, the system responds that there would be no time limit at all, then asks the Prota if he truly wishes to follow the main route to become king once again. Without thinking twice, the Prota replies that of course he would accept, as he'd be crazy not to. With that said, the system wishes him good luck on his new journey of ascension in the game Throne of Souls. After returning from his game world, he's confused as he hears someone calling him, telling him to look up, only to realize that it was a girl tied up, hanging upside down. She says she thought he had died there and asks what he's doing back alive, and if, by any chance, he's a reborn. This girl is a mage elf named Glory, one of the princess's guards, and is at level 21. Along with her, there are 3 more people tied up. Glory quickly tells the Prota that it doesn't matter why he's alive, urging him to try and get them down before the monsters return, as they need to get out of there as soon as possible. Hoshi, who is also one of the princess's guards, with his class as a human warrior, gets angry with Glory, asking if she really thought that the cowardly Prote would try to save them, since he was just crying and calling for his mother during the attack. Hoshi becomes even more irritated, remembering that they had been betrayed, and if it weren't for that, they wouldn't be in the current situation. Dagu, completely calm, responds that nothing made sense at that moment, and points out that everyone there was going to be killed. Dagu is also part of the princess's guard, and his class is that of a beast hunter. Bai Qi, observing Princess Mina, becomes intrigued by the Star Kingdom, about her and her guards, as all those names were quite familiar to him, until the Prota remembers, becoming alarmed, that they were all NPCs he shouldn't encounter at the beginning of the game, and that the dungeon, ululating cave, wasn't part of the initial map either. He becomes even more frightened because just imagining it already gave him chills, and if he had chosen to be born as an ordinary human, he would already be dead at that moment. He was in the ululating cave dungeon, where the recommended level was between 20 and 30. The Prota, however, was a human without a class, being only level 1. Looking around, he says that it was expected that the system would do something of that level to him, as he couldn't understand what had happened. The sequence of territories was completely scrambled, He should have been reborn in the initial territory, Kafir Anka, for levels 1 to 10, then proceed to the Burnt Jungle, a territory for players of levels 10 to 20, and only then move on to the level 20 to 30 territory, Ululating Cave, to save Princess Mina and her group, who were hanging upside down, to gather enough strength to complete the dungeon. After imagining all of this, the Prota decides to change his mind, thinking that he should first choose a class quickly and find a way out of there. He then asks his system, which begins the class selection process. Quickly, the system informs him that the class selection process has started, asking the Prote to choose his class. The first option is the Warrior class, a melee combat class that uses a shield and a longsword, balancing defense and attack. The second option is the Mage class, a long-range class that uses staves and spells, balancing attack and support magic. The Assassin class is a melee and long-range combat class, able to use daggers and throwing knives, with high attack power and agility. There is also the Hunter class, a melee and long-range combat class that uses a one-handed staff or bow and arrows, capable of controlling elemental power to enhance attacks. And finally, the No class option, where a player without a class is despised by everyone. It has no additional skills or attributes, starting the game with cloth clothing and a basic staff. After observing all these classes, the Prota replies that there was no need to show them all, since he would choose the same class he picked when he played Throne of Souls for the first time, opting for no class. His system is baffled by the Prota's choice, saying that with so many useful class options, he chose the one with the worst skills and attributes. Bai Qi, confident in his choice, explains to the system that class choice in the game Throne of Souls is extremely important for the player's initial survival. However, in the next class advancements, secondary classes must be chosen that are related to the main class. The No class option is the one with the highest difficulty for survival in the game, but it's the only one that allows the player to find an NPC to increase attributes and perform class changes without restrictions. The Prota also clarifies that even though it's the hardest, it's also the most rewarding, and moreover, it comes with hidden resources. With this class, he will be able to complete the achievements of all classes without needing to restart the game to create characters for each of the other classes. He also emphasizes that it was precisely because of this that he became the first player to obtain all the achievements in the game Throne of Souls. The system says it understands, affirming that his speech was worthy of the best player they had. Therefore, the system informs the Prota that his main mission has been updated. His mission is to survive and reach the exit of the Wir'ed, the Ululating Cave, and the mission reward will be account unlock points, 1 point. The system explains that these account unlock points serve to unlock 25% of the items in the current game account's warehouse or any other account with no level restrictions on use, or randomly unlock a new game account along with the corresponding 25% usage rights for items and abilities. Bai Qi returns to the game, imagining that he just needs to get out of that dungeon alive, and soon hears Princess Mina's group asking him to go to the rope tied in front of him and untie them so they can get out of there together. The Prota walks to the rock holding the ropes and becomes thoughtful, wondering whether or not he should untie them, as they had no idea what could happen if he released the ropes. Remembering that last time he had cut the ropes and everyone was happy, wanting to wake the princess to get out of there as quickly as possible. However, they didn't notice an attack coming toward Glory, who was struck and slammed hard into the cave wall. Soon after, they were frightened when the leader of the Plague Clan, the Bloody Axe, appeared before them. Bai Qi still remembers that last time. As soon as he cut the ropes that held them, it automatically triggered the boss battle of the cave. He imagines that this battle will be very difficult and that everyone will need to give their best. But if he tries to fight without any skills or attributes, he will end up dead. Thinking about this, he concludes that he should leave the cave alone to receive his reward and perhaps return later to save them. Since, being important NPCs for the story, their lives are not his priority at that moment. So, after recalling how the events would unfold if he cut the rope and helped them, the Prota turns around, deciding not to help them. Glory, furious, asks the Prota where he is going and if he's crazy to leave them there to die. Hoshi, however, comments that he had already said before not to waste time on the Prota, as he was just a cowardly, classless boy, and he'd bet a lot of money that the Proto wouldn't survive a minute alone there. Bai Chi hears the insults but pays no attention and responds that he wouldn't waste time explaining things to them, because even if he told them, they wouldn't believe him. He imagines that the time is almost right. As he walks, the Prota comes across a level 5 Plague Clan hatchling and prepares himself. The monster notices the Prota and lets out a roar, while the princess's group starts laughing, saying that even though it's just a level 5 hatchling, it would be enough to defeat the Prota, who is level 1, and to make matters worse, is classless. The monster quickly charges at the Prota, who stays on guard, thinking that even though he didn't choose to save that bunch of idiots, he would still get out of there alive, even though it's difficult to defeat a level 5 monster with his current level. The monster attacks the Prota, who dodges by rolling backward, then dodges again by rolling to the side without losing any health points, leaving the monster confused, as it couldn't hit him at all. Hoshi, surprised, asks how the Prote managed to dodge 2 consecutive attacks, wondering if perhaps he was lucky. Glory responds that it wasn't luck, explaining that even though the dodges weren't perfect, he performed them at the exact moment. The Prota gets excited, realizing that apparently there was no delay between his mind and his movements, and even though he didn't have additional attributes or skills, he still had all the experience he'd accumulated from playing the game for so long. At that moment, the Plague Clan hatchling throws a bomb at the Prota, which explodes immediately. However, the Prota emerges from the explosion's smoke, charging at the monster, which was confused, never imagining the Prota would emerge from the explosion, hitting the monster's head right after. After battling for a while, Bai Chi gets irritated and says he's going to finish it. He says this as the monster roars, charging at him. However, the Prota lands a blow on the monster's head, and due to the force, its head spins uncontrollably, finishing it off. Glory can't believe that the Prota managed to defeat the level 5 Plague Clan hatchling without a scratch on his body, and to top it off, with only a basic staff. Hoshi admits that he underestimated him, but seeing how much he struggled to defeat just one level 5 monster, he comments that it will be impossible for him to get out of there alive. Bai Chi sits on top of the monster to rest, thinking that even though he can dodge due to his combat experience, he won't be able to overcome the attack power difference anytime soon, as his attributes are very low and his weapons are even weaker. He knows that this won't be relevant, as he chose to play as no class, and will need to play in an unconventional way, avoiding all fights that aren't absolutely necessary. The system notifies him that he has defeated the level 5 Plague Clan hatchling and received 100 soul points, 2 gold coins, and the item Broken Mace, along with an additional 5 attack points. Bai Chi quickly opens a status window, knowing it would look terrible, as he still needs 900 more soul points to level up. His main goal is to escape the ululating cave as quickly and safely as possible. He picks up his broken mace from the ground and gets up, while the princess's group desperately asks the Prote to save them, promising to give him whatever he wants. At that moment, Princess Mina wakes up, asking Glory to stop begging, as the Prota can't even deal with his own problems. Mina makes it clear to the Prota that even if his choice is not to save them, she respects his decision. However, she advises him that in life or death situations, he should always be very careful. Bai Chi imagines that even in the face of death, she remains calm and elegant, truly worthy of being the princess of the Star Kingdom. He continues walking through the cave, saying that he had his own plan from the start, but didn't want to mention it because they wouldn't believe him if he said he would come back to save them. Hoshi, furious, asks the Prota if he's trying to mock them. Mina asks her guard to stop, saying that if he has the energy to yell, he should use it to think of a way to get them out of there. The Prota imagines that in the original story, even if he didn't save them, they would still find a way out, but that would make him lose many rewards and achievements related to Princess Mina, and that saving them or not will all depend on how he manages to reach the exit safely and what rewards he will receive. He knows that making allies is extremely important, but his survival is his priority. After all, the ululating cave contains many valuable secrets. He's passed through it so many times that he knows each one like the back of his hand. Therefore, if he wants to encounter as few enemies as possible, he'll have to take a certain path where the Prota will need to meet a specific character. After walking a bit through the cave, Baichi reaches a certain spot, approaches a large jar, and hears someone asking from inside the jar who's there, since they don't smell like a Plague Clan hatchling, asking the Prota not to be afraid and to come closer, as they would explain why they were trapped inside the jar. Then, they explain that they came to the cave in search of treasure and hid in the jar to escape the monsters, but ended up stuck there and never managed to get out, begging the Prote to please free them. Without thinking twice, the Prota breaks the jar, freeing them. This person is Lucci, who is at level 27. He's surprised, as the Prota really saved him, saying that he owes him one, and that if he ever needs something, he just has to ask. And if it's within his reach, he'll gladly help. Baiki, desperate, asks Lucci for help, explaining that his friends were captured by the beasts and he wanted to save them, but couldn't, because at his current level, it would be impossible. Lucci, observing the Prota's request, says that he is brave but not very smart, and assures him that he will help and that everything will be fine because he is with him. After walking a bit, they come face to face with a monster that, upon noticing them, charges immediately. It's already an adult ogre from the Plague Clan. At level 18, Lucci blocks the monster's attack, but loses some of his life, and, furious, asks the monster if it was the one who imprisoned him in the jar. He drives his sword into the monster's belly, taking half its HP, saying that because he was stuck inside the jar, he almost died. But, without wasting time, he delivers another blow, shouting that the one who would die would be the monster. The Prota, watching Lucci, is impressed. After finishing off the monster, Lucci steps on the severed head of the Plague Clan monster, saying that he would never have dared to come there in search of treasures if he wasn't confident in his abilities. After that, they continue walking through the cave, and near the cliff, the Prota says he heard his friends' voices coming from there and doesn't know how much longer they will hold out, warning Lord Lucci that they need to find a way to save them as soon as possible. Lucci responds that it would be quite simple. He says this and kicks the Prota, knocking him into the abyss, while stating that he had an idea and would solve it in the blink of an eye. As the Prota falls, screaming, Lucci crouches near the precipice and apologizes, saying that his old habits never die and that he can never resist the temptation when he sees someone standing at the edge of a cliff. He says this laughing, but he is certain the Prota could have resisted the push if he wanted to, even though he saved him. He had already realized that Baiki is a reborn. Baiki, at the bottom of the cliff, yells at Lucci, asking how he figured it out. Lucci just responds with another question, asking how he fell from such a high cliff and was still alive. The Prota, with his hand on his rib and his HP extremely low, says that if he had jumped on his own, he would have certainly died. But with Lucci's push, he managed to survive. However, even though he didn't die, the Prota complains about the pain from his ruptured organs. But at least he's happy, because he knows exactly what items he can find down there. The system informs him that he obtained a blood soul bottle and a fragment of a shining stone. Lucci turns and says he had heard that these reborn were strange, and that, instead of kicking the Prota, he should have stabbed him to make sure he was dead. He wonders how he could have made such a mistake, but since the Prota was stuck down there, it's not like he has many chances of survival, and he says he'll wait there until the Prote dies. The Prota explains that Lucci is a cunning NPC who loves to kick players from cliff edges. However, the game has a mechanic that allows survival from falls when the person is thrown, and that's the only way to access certain locations. But soon, he becomes intrigued, as the term reborn was never a mechanic present in Throne of Souls, and he wonders what the system was trying to do with that. He thinks about it and soon takes a potion that fully restores his HP, while the system explains to him that most of the information about the reborn is blocked, and the only thing he can know at that moment is that reborn refers to those who came back from death under unknown special conditions. Baiki becomes curious about the system's explanation and considers that it will definitely be something very important he will have to discover in the future, as everyone he had encountered so far was not happy to learn that he was a reborn. He then decides it would be better to hide it from that moment on. Using his shining stone to light the way, he figures he'll have to put that aside because even if the plague beasts weren't down there, the terrain is very rugged. He needs to gather his energies because the real danger was just beginning. He says this as he stands before the secret area of the Howling Cave, Lost Ruins, whose level is unknown. Baiki also explains that Throne of Souls is an open-world action-adventure game. The game's plot is divided into various side quests, making players need to find clues from different NPCs, monsters, bosses, ruins, and places to uncover the world's truths. And, since he is a player who had already finished the game, it was obvious that he knew everything about it. In the heart of that world, Pasqualo, there is a crystal called the Soul of the World, where all races lived in harmony under the crystal's protection and energy, until one day, an alien spaceship called the Unmanned Advanced Spacecraft crashed into that world. Coincidentally, the spot where the spaceship crashed was exactly where the Soul of the World was located, and the entire foundation of the world was destroyed. The Prota also comments that, although this seemed like the end of Pasqualo, it wasn't, because the world continued to adapt, giving rise to new species and different civilizations. And the place where he was at that moment was the abandoned ruins of the underground civilization. He becomes worried because in those ruins, at the bottom of the Howling Cave, there is a secret exit through a river. The mission only stated that he needed to reach the exit, but never specified which exit it should be, and that makes his life much easier. Although the path is not guarded by the Plague Clan, the mortality rate there is much higher because it is necessary to calculate precisely where he will land to avoid hitting the stalactites protruding from the walls. Baiki also knows that if he is not careful, he will end up dying, but with all the experience accumulated from dying countless times there, reaching the bottom won't be a problem for him. The Prota is sure of one thing. An important piece of information is that the opening narrows as you descend into the pit, and even though he remembers the location of each platform, he figures it's better to proceed with caution. However, Baiki barely begins to descend and already slips, having to move quickly to land on another edge. He feels relieved, imagining he almost made a fatal mistake and is now almost at the bottom, needing to proceed more carefully. But then, someone appears behind him, asking if by any chance the Prote was trying to leave already. This startles Baiki, who quickly turns and strikes with his mace. But Harvey jumps back, dodging the attack and landing on one of the edges, while the Prota yells, asking who he is. This person is Harvey, level 28, and his class is Elemental Archer. He laughs and asks the Prota if he scared him by any chance, and says that Baiki is too hot-headed for a level 1 unclassed player. He also makes it clear that if he wanted, he could have easily ripped out the Prota's heart before he even had time to react. Frightened, the Prota yells at Harvey, asking who he was and why he appeared out of nowhere, until Baiki remembers that when he fell off the cliff, he asks Lucci if he wasn't the corpse that was at the bottom of the cave recently, and if, by any chance, he was a reborn too. Lucci starts laughing, moving like a madman, saying that the Prota is too slow and that he doesn't blame him because he will have to face someone who has already been reborn as a level 28 Elemental Archer, and it was very unfortunate for the Prota to be a classless reborn, still at level 1. He says this, and quickly appears behind the Prota, ready to strike, saying that he is so irrelevant that he doesn't even feel like killing him. Baiki is scared because he didn't expect Lucci to be so fast. But before the Prota has time to do anything, he is attacked, losing half of his HP. Baiki falls to his knees, coughing heavily, and asks Lucci why he is trying to hurt him, as he had done nothing to him. He also comments that since they were both reborn, they should help each other instead of fighting. Lucci jumps in front of the Prota and asks if, by any chance, the system hadn't warned him that all living beings are enemies to a reborn, but the greatest enemy of all is other reborn. He also comments that after seeing the Prota moving across the platform with such mastery, he thought there was something special about him. However, he was wrong, as it seems the Prota doesn't even know the basics and is wasting the chance of rebirth. Baiki becomes furious and, with great difficulty, strikes an attack, while telling Lucci to disappear, as he would never believe his lies. But Lucci cuts the Prota's mace in half, letting out a malicious laugh, and comments that a brat like the Prota at level 1 would never understand, and that he won't waste any more time. In exchange for having shown the way to that point, he won't kill him. Lucci then jumps back, bidding farewell to the Prota and saying that whether he lives or dies will depend solely on him, and if he manages to survive, he can seek him out for revenge. At that moment, Baiki can barely breathe and asks his system what the hell is going on, and what other information about the reborn the world is hiding from him. The system quickly responds that it's not hiding anything, and explains that the blocked information needs to be unlocked through effort. And, thanks to recent events, 3 new pieces of information about the reborn can now be revealed. The first is that the reborn are seen in the current world as beings of extreme evil and will be hated by all other races. The reason for this is still locked. The reborn seem to possess a greater cruelty and thirst for blood. The reason for this is also still locked. And when the player starts their journey, they can gain many soul points and experience points by killing other reborn, and they can also obtain blood soul points to unlock new accounts. The second is that reborn is the term used to refer to beings who have been reborn in the current world, but the term is not limited exclusively to humans. The reason for this is also not unlocked, and the reborn will appear in the current world with random race, gender, class, identity, and levels. Low-level reborn will be quickly recognized by high-level reborn, except for the classless, as all other classes have initial information about the reborn. The third piece of information the system explains is that the classless can obtain special information when they advance in class. However, the information about the system differences for each reborn has not yet been unlocked. Due to paralysis in his body, the Prota begins to fall from the precipice, wondering why the system took so long to explain to him, as he was already dying, imagining that the world of Throne of Souls is indeed very chaotic. But he tries with all his might to hold on to the beams on the wall, and with all his strength grabs one, saying that he will never give up and will not waste his rebirth, as he was almost at the end of the cave. He then lets go, thinking that even though the pain is unbearable, he needs to keep moving forward because there's not much left, falling from beam to beam until he finally crashes to the ground with his HP very low. Trembling from the pain, the Prota laughs, imagining that he has won, that the exit is just 10 meters away, and that he just needs to crawl a little and he'll be out of that hell. But he quickly becomes worried when he hears and smells something strange, soon becoming scared, as a level 25 fanged worm has just appeared in front of him, a rare type of monster. He wonders why the hell there's a monster like that here, as he remembers that there weren't supposed to be any monsters at that exit. Then he imagines that he needs to take advantage of the monster's slow movements and crawl to the exit as quickly as possible, but the fanged worm splits into several sinister little monsters, which begin to surround the Prota, making him even more terrified, as he hadn't expected the monster to split so soon, taking on its second stage form, and that, indeed, the monster shouldn't exist there, let alone in its current form. Finding all of this very strange, Baiki becomes surprised, suspecting that perhaps it was Lucci who lured the monster there to kill him. He grows frustrated as the appearance of the fanged worm had completely ruined all his perfectly laid plans. He then considers that if things continue like this, he will end up truly dying. But the monster wastes no time and leaps toward the Proto to devour him. Baiki jumps to the side, falling into an acid river, thinking that he had fought countless battles before, and that they shouldn't underestimate him because he wouldn't be caught so easily. He starts screaming in pain, realizing that the underground river had become an acid river. After years of accumulated pollution, it can melt almost any living being, even with the agony of having his flesh melted, a pain worse than death. He asks them not to underestimate his will to stay alive. Though the acid river is corroding him down to the bones, he still has some tissue left to protect himself. However, for the fanged worms, who are completely exposed, the river's water is lethal. As Baiki crawls toward the exit, his health decreases gradually due to the river's corrosion, but he feels somewhat relieved as the fanged worms are scared of the river. He makes it clear that he will not accept living a life like the one he had before, full of regrets and frustrations. He explains that he was born in a small village in the countryside, near many mountains. He thought that the only way to improve his life was to be accepted into a prestigious school in the capital, and that's why he abandoned his mother and his hometown. He also recalls when he was working hard at his job, and his former boss yelled at him, asking why he was so slow and telling him that if he didn't improve, he could leave. And at night, he had no peace either, as his roommate drove him crazy, saying that he did nothing during the day, and at night, he studied with a flashlight, disturbing his sleep. However, Baiki also explains that despite going through many hardships, he never gave up because of the hope he held in his heart. He then explains that fortunately, he was accepted into the university of his dreams. However, soon after, his mother was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and that's when his world fell apart. So many years of effort and hard work were in vain. Even though he dropped out of school, took on other part-time jobs, and took out loans, he wasn't able to save his mother. Baiki also comments that working in streaming games became his life. Even though things weren't getting better, his popularity skyrocketed thanks to a certain game. However, just as he was about to reach the peak of his career, he was killed inexplicably. And not too long ago, he didn't care whether he was alive or dead. But now, he wouldn't accept dying that way. Having the chance to be reborn in the world of a game he knew, only to die pathetically, was totally out of the question. Thinking this, he stands up and leaps toward the cave's exit, telling the fanged worms that he wouldn't stand still, waiting for death to catch up with him. He makes it clear that to become the king of that world, he wouldn't die there. He says this as some of the monsters bite into his body, leaving him with only 3% of his health. However, he reaches the exit. Immediately, the system notifies him that he has successfully escaped the Howling Cave, and for that, he has earned one account unlock point, asking the Proto to choose between the following options. The first, it allows him to unlock items from his old account with 25% of the original attributes in his current account storage, which can be random and without level restrictions. The second, it allows him to unlock 25% of the resources of a new account with one item and one skill. While being devoured by the monsters, the system informs that the Prote selected the first option, stating that 25% of his storage items have been unlocked and will arrive immediately. After that, an intense energy bursts out of the Proto, finishing off the monsters that were on his body. With the items in his inventory, he immediately uses the Essence of Sacred Blood, which instantly restores 100% of his health and increases his versatility points by 30. Baiki also equips his Blood Shadow set, a professional assassin set that greatly boosts agility and intelligence, with the set's special effect being the Shadow Thrust. Lastly, he equips the Scarlet Assassin Dagger, a dual dagger and the best weapon for assassins, offering high attack speed and lethality. When equipped, it unlocks the ability Scarlet Fireworks. At that moment, a massive explosion occurs, with numerous attacks striking the fanged worms. The Proto comments that he had said it wouldn't be easy to defeat him, as he had held on until the last moment, because that's how a future king should act. He says this, releasing incredible power, causing lightning to shoot out of his body. However, the monsters are undeterred and charge at the Proto, who quickly counterattacks, delivering countless slashes, easily eliminating several fanged worms. Baiki is pleased, realizing that choosing to retrieve his old account items was the right decision. Even though it was only 25% of the original attributes, it was more than enough to get him through the initial stages, especially since he only keeps the best items in his inventory. The Proto becomes confident, stating that from that moment on, his true story would begin. However, he doesn't notice the fanged worms merging again, forming a massive monster, ready to devour the Proto. He just gets frustrated, asking the monster why it was screaming so much. At that moment, the system informs Baiki that the secret mission has been updated, instructing him to kill the fanged worm, and if successful, he will receive 3 soul points as a reward. He throws his daggers into the air, getting excited by the system's notification, then catches them and prepares himself, as that was exactly the reward he was aiming for. He says this and uses his ability, Scarlet Fireworks, asking the monster if it was ready to become his first prey. He then charges at the monster with full force, shouting that the real battle between them was about to begin. That's all, folks. If you enjoy the video, subscribe and hit the bell. Thanks.